Welcome to CFO Principles interview series, where we explore how businesses are built. In this episode, we're talking to Peter Voss, who is the founder, CEO, and chief scientist at Aigo. Aigo is a company that is developing chatbots for use in a commercial space, but they're applying machine learning to them to enable the chatbot to have a human-like experience with the underlying customers. They're in the B2B space, and they're embedding their technology inside of their customers' platforms to enable them to serve their customers better. This business is very interesting because the team behind it has spent a significant amount of time building the business right, taking the product and really understanding what it takes to do this well. And in fact, they're taking years of experience, years of research, and years of technical experimentation to get to a point of where they are. And Peter himself is a very interesting individual as well, because he's a very experienced entrepreneur. He has taken multiple companies from inception, meaning startup, and has successfully exited them. And in fact, he has an IPO under his belt. I'm really excited to have him here today, and thank you for being here, Peter. So let's begin with the history of the company. If you could tell me a little bit about where the company began and what has been the journey for you to get to the point where you are today.
I think to give you a little bit of a longer answer, to give you the context, I'll be going back quite a while. So I started out as an electronics engineer. Started my own company. That was the first company I started. Then I fell in love with software. Basically, it was around about the time where you could really start programming chips. And so my hardware company turned into a software company, and I designed a comprehensive ERP software system for medium-sized businesses, really encompassing everything. Our strength was particularly inventory management, order management, but we also handled accounting, payroll, production planning, and all of that kind of stuff. And that company was quite successful. We went from the garage to 400 people and did an IPO. So that was super exciting. Yeah. Love to do that again. And we can talk more about the sort of financing and that you want to talk about. But when I exited that company, I had enough time and freedom to say, what big project do I really want to tackle next? And what struck me is how stupid software is. And I say that being very proud of my own software. I think our software is really good. But still, if the programmer didn't think of something, you will just get an error message or it'll do the wrong thing. There's no common sense. There's no learning. There's no reasoning. And that's really the problem I wanted to tackle. How do we make software intelligent? And so I took off 5 years to actually study all different aspects of intelligence, to really deeply understand that. And I started with philosophy, epistemology, theory of knowledge. How do we know anything? How can we be certain of things? Also cognitive psychology. What do IQ tests measure? How do children learn? How does our intelligence differ from animal intelligence? Really understanding cognition and intelligence very thoroughly. Obviously, I also studied what else had been done in the field of AI. So during that 5-year period, I came up with a design for a artificial brain, a thinking machine, so to speak. So in 2001, I then felt ready to start hiring a team and start to build stuff. But our company was actually in R&D mode for about 5 years. I hired about 12 people, and we built various prototypes, basically turning my ideas into, actual working code. But we did a lot of development and experimentation during that period. By the way, in 2001, I also coined the term artificial general intelligence, or AGI, together with 2 other people. And that's a term that's actually become quite widely used now to refer to the kind of AI that can really think and reason the way humans do. We wrote a book on the topic in 2001 as well. So that was my first AI company then, 2001. After 5 years of R&D, we then launched, a bit more than 5 years actually, we then launched the first commercial product. And that's a company called Smart Action. And what we're doing here is to automate phone calls. Normally when you call into a company and you talk to a robot, people hate that. Just press 0 to get to an operator. Yeah, these things are usually pretty awful. And so basically, our byline for Smart Action is automating calls intelligently. So it's basically doing that with a brain, with a cognitive engine, so that the system actually remembers what you said earlier in the conversation, and you don't have to repeat yourself. It has a much deeper understanding of what you say, and so the whole experience is much better, and we can automate a larger percentage of calls that come into the call center. So that company was launched in 2008. And, we did quite well. The company is now about 100 people. We have some marquee clients there. But I exited the company about 7 years ago to concentrate again on developing the technology and taking it to the next level. Because I found within Smart Action, I was spending all of my time, on sort of normal business expansion, dealing with sales, marketing. We built our own data center, HIPAA compliance, PCI compliance, scalability, redundancy, all of the kind of engineering and sales, and that didn't really have enough time to make the system, to take it to the next level in terms of intelligence and understanding. So 7 years ago, I left and started what is now Aigo.ai, my current company. And again, I hired about a dozen people. And for many years, we were just in development mode on purpose. We didn't take on any clients at all. We wanted just to concentrate on cranking up the IQ of the system. And so about 2 years ago or so, I felt ready to now commercialize the second generation of our technology in Aigo. And we launched officially just over a year ago, and we signed up some great clients now, and we are now in full commercial production mode. So that's kind of the history of how I got to where I am today. And today we doubled our staff over the last 12 months. We're now 25 people, and I expect that we'll double again probably in the next year.
Great. So this is actually really interesting because you've gone through a series of multiple companies, right, from inception to, in at least one case, IPO, right, and then another case,
right,
this new organization. But so when you, in all these cases, you're building products. How do you define? How do you look at product development process? And what you've done it once, you've done it twice, you've done it a third time. How do you see that life cycle of product development?
Yeah, I'd like to. I need to point out that what we're doing is probably very, very unusual. Mm-hmm. In that I have this vision, this mission, and I had enough sort of flexibility, financial flexibility, in that to really pursue this mission. And it's really been driven much more by moving towards the end objective of having intelligent software. That's been much more my focus than, trying to achieve an exit or, maximize revenue in the short term. Now, of course, there are practical considerations. I don't have unlimited funds myself. In fact, fairly limited. So, there's always been pressure on doing that. Looking back at my first big company, the one that went public, during a 7-year period, we actually went through 4 generations of our software. So that's very much what I believe. In the software industry, you probably want to have that. And you need to have the attitude, you need to have a team to be able to do that. Because I think if you get stuck in a particular, your first design,
sure,
your competitors are going to get you unless you can really become so big and so dominant that you can then live with your legacy software. But you really have to keep innovating. So over 7 years, we had 4 generations. We got to the 4th generation of our software, and that was almost a complete rewrite of the software every time.
How did you tackle the fact that I presume Gen 1 was in the customer's hands, Gen 2 was then in the customer's hands. How did you tackle the fact that you've got this working product, you're working on this new one, and now you got to tell the customer, hey, obviously you're, a good thing we're developing a new product,
right,
but it's going to be a pain for you to kind of learn these new things. How did you tackle that?
Right, you're right. That is it's both an opportunity and a challenge. Obviously, an opportunity because each generation, of course, was so much better than the previous one. With everything we'd learned and how technology had moved forward. So basically, in most cases, our customers were happy to have these new features available, and were willing to retrain their staff to the extent necessary, but also I always paid a lot of attention to make the software really easy to use. Mm-hmm. And, to the extent possible, we automated the upgrade process so that it was as painless as possible. But having said that, some customers had a lot of very customized stuff done for them. Mm-hmm. And the upgrade path wasn't that easy, or they weren't willing to pay more money for it. And, then we had to decide, do we just foot the bill to get rid of the older version? That we don't have to maintain it, or how do we handle it?
And how did you go through the economics of that, right? Because you briefly mentioned it. Did you say, hey, customers, now we've got a better product, we're going to upgrade you, but the price got to go up with it? Or did you choose to keep legacy pricing with the new product?
Yes, but it's a bit of stick and carrot, basically, and then certainly after. If most of the customers had transitioned, then you could also say, we're going to increase our support fees are going to go up because, this is more difficult to support now. Mm-hmm. We did end up having, there's probably, I think, one customer who was still using the version 1 software 20 years later, and, it didn't need any more maintenance, and they just were happy with what it was doing. They didn't want to spend another penny. And they just continued using it, and that was okay. For them, it worked. They didn't need any upgrades. But it's a challenge. But I think you really need to do that to keep innovating. And I mean, maybe not at the cadence that I'm talking about. But any software product that's 5 years old, chances are you're going to be behind the curve. Okay. And you learn so much by implementing customers, taking them on, and not to build that, not to say, hey, if I knew then what I know now, I would have designed the product differently. Your company grows, you have more resources, technology moves forward. So, clearly 5 years later, you can build a better product, mm-hmm. and you should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. It's kind of, I love that you actually put it in terms of time frames. 5 years is about the right time frame, right? Because that's where you got to reinvent. So in each one of these businesses that you're working with and building them out, right, you obviously have gone through life cycles. And in your particular case, you've seen these life cycles potentially repeat themselves. Now, some organizations define them in terms of headcount, others in terms of revenue. How do you look at those life cycles, and how do you define them, and what are some of the thresholds that you see?
Yeah, so in my first big company, where we went to 400 people, obviously there was a very big change in the dynamic as we went from 20, 30 people to 100 and then to 400. We actually had ended up having 4 big divisions, which had their own heads of each of the divisions. So, initially until we got to about 100 people, I was actually very hands-on. I had like 10 people report to me, which was okay. That worked for me. I'm not saying that that's the ideal formula or the best formula or one that will work for everyone, but that worked for me. So I think it depends on the structure of the company, how autonomous the divisions are. In that company, we also had branch offices that were located, quite far away. And So they had to be pretty autonomous to run by themselves. And then we had also different divisions that had different products. So again, they had to be some autonomy. But if you have a more integrated, uniform company, I guess it can be more incremental. Currently, we still, we're 25 people. It's still, there's not really much of a management layer there. It's, many of the people have been with us for many years. So they really know what needs to be done. They're self-motivated, self-organizing to a large extent. So we don't need a lot of management right now. But that is a challenge in that also a lot of the great people that we have in the company don't actually want to be managers. So we don't have an obvious upgrade path. And then to bring outsiders and to hire outside people as managers who clearly don't have the background knowledge is quite challenging. But we've managed that okay so far.
Mm-hmm. And what is across in Aigo and across the other businesses that you've built, have you seen some similarities in instances where you've potentially had to make pivotal decisions in the business? So, for example, hey, we're realizing the product that we're building today is not really what customers want, and there's a pivot that needs to be made. Have you seen any sort of consistencies through the experiences?
Well, I mean, for me, the one big sort of pivot was actually for me to exit Smart Action, because Smart Action was actually the first company with our AI product, but I found myself sort of really trapped in the company, as I said, in terms of spending all of the time and resources of the company building out engineering and sales and so on, and not being able to develop the product further, or at least not at the pace at which I wanted to do that. And so that was a hard decision, a big decision, to basically say, no, I kind of need to reboot to get the product itself become more and more intelligent and to sort of reach the long-term goal that I want. And within Aigo, the investors we've brought on board are very much in agreement with our philosophy that we need to continue innovating on our product and spending a significant amount of effort to continue cranking up the IQ as we develop the business side. Now, in terms of pivoting product wise, maybe I was lucky in or smart or whatever in picking the right dimension. Even in the first company, there was just an almost unlimited demand for our for the product that we developed, and that wasn't really a bottleneck. In Smart Action as well, there's still an unlimited demand for it. The bottlenecks are more, how good are you at building sales and marketing and engineering, and do you have enough money to expand the company quick enough? Now in Aigo.ai, it's still early days, but so far again we're seeing there's just a huge pent up demand for what we're basically providing here in Aigo is chatbot technology, where Smart Action focused on voice interactions. We are initially focusing on text interactions because that's become a much bigger channel. Mm-hmm. That's the fastest growing channel for companies, communication channel, that more and more people want to interact texting a company and using chat rather than voice. Now, we obviously are always listening to our customers in terms of what are their main pain points and how do we develop our product and what direction do we go? Where do we, is adding voice to our system the most important thing, or other omni-channel capabilities, graphics capabilities, or helping their operators be more effective. So that's kind of where we just have to set our priorities in terms of our ongoing development. Mm-hmm. But I haven't experienced it where we kind of found ourselves going completely in the wrong direction, either product-wise or market-wise. I'm sure it can happen, but it hasn't really happened so far.
It does not smell like luck so far. So I want to congratulate there and point that out. But so the next part that I want to dive into is a strategy and the infrastructure, right? So as your business building the business, kind of how you think about strategy and how you're building the functional units in the business. So particularly when you're building out your team, what functional units, and if you think about it in terms of units, do you start with first, and why?
Right. So that has been different in the different companies. So let me talk about Igo, a focus on Igo. So in Igo, we made the strategic decision, because of the history and the experience we already had in the field, is to go after large corporate clients. So a small number of large clients, which is something generally I'd like to say, don't try that at home. It's maybe not the thing you want to start with, because obviously breaking into large clients is very difficult. It's extremely time consuming. If you're a small company, you don't have the credibility, you obviously have a huge handicap. You're often putting all your eggs in one basket or in a few baskets, saying we have these 3 big prospects that we're pursuing. We're putting a lot of effort into trying to get them, and then all 3 of them could disappear, and then you run out of runway or whatever. But we basically decided that this time around we had enough credibility and resources that we could take that approach. And, that we going after large clients, that each client would have a minimum of $500,000 recurring revenue, that sort of size. With my previous company, we were happy to sign up a customer at $500 a month, so very different. But and I have a fantastic partner in the business who's handling the sales and marketing side. I mean, I'm also quite involved in the sales, but he really runs with it, and he has very strong experience and connections in dealing with large enterprise clients. So the strategy we have here is not having a big sales department, which is what you'd normally have in a SaaS company, where you're trying to sign up hundreds of customers or thousands of customers. We really just it's kind of a 1-man, 2-man team to get those big clients signed up, and it looks like we're being quite successful in that strategy. But as I say, it's not maybe something I'd recommend startup companies to do. Certainly, in my previous companies, whenever we've tried going after large corporate accounts, usually we just ended up wasting an enormous amount of effort and time and not getting the business after all, because in the final analysis they said, oh, well, I'll just buy IBM and then I can't get fired if it doesn't work,
Yeah, exactly. So do you think about an Igo as so you mentioned that you're building a sales organization inside the business. How do you think about the other departments? So for example, do you think about developing HR departments and then legal departments and then R&D departments, or are you keeping it more free flowing and kind of trying to avoid infrastructure? How do you tackle?
Right. So again, at the current size, I mean, we have a very competent CFO. She also handles HR, and she has a lot of experience in those areas. So she pretty much handles that. So we don't, it's a one person department we have there, and we've worked together for many years in previous companies as well. And so we do want to keep a separate development team to keep moving forward our technology. But that's really what our company started with. For 5 years, we were just in development mode. So a lot of those people, quite a few of them have been with us 3, 4, 5 years, or in some cases even 7 years. So they really know the technology, know the product. And I want to keep them as much as possible on the development side. Now, right now, they obviously getting involved with helping, get customers up and running. But the idea is to keep the development team quite separate, and to have basically a separate implementation department. So we at the moment, our company is essentially, we have the implementation department. It's totally customer facing, and in fact, we hired about 8 months ago. We hired a VP of customer delight.
That's a sexy title, right there.
Yeah, that's his task, to keep our customers happy, and that goes from implementation, going through the implementation, planning everything, what the information we need to actually do the implementation, and then to give ongoing support. So he's responsible for the team, for basically the customer engagement from start to finish. And then we have our engineering team, which basically support both the customer side of things and also the development side of things, where extra engineering needs to be done. So that's the structure of our company at the moment, is having those departments. And, we'd like to keep lean, and because I personally enjoy both the business side of things, financial side, running a company and so on. I'm also chief scientist. I actually do a lot of the architecting. I code every day still. So I'm very, very hands-on the engineering side as well on the business side. It kind of makes sense for me to, really, really be in touch with all of the different departments. And that also allows us to keep fairly lean, that we don't need to have a lot of high-powered people that we need to bring in, which can also, disrupt the communication flow.
And so when you're also building those functional units, how do you think about when the right time is to have, so let's say legal, right? In an organization where you're going for large enterprise customers, legal is going to be a big headache.
Yes.
How do you, what strategy are you looking at and saying, okay, this is the time to have somebody in-house versus actually having my, going off to the big lawyers of the world?
Yeah. So I don't think for any of those things, whether it's HR or marketing or legal, those kind of functions, whether you farm them out or have them in-house, I think you have to look at the practicalities. Mm-hmm. If we have, we currently have an excellent legal counsel external, who's really been fantastic. So I have no motivation, as long as, he's available to support us, I have no motivation to bring that in-house. And I see that you bring somebody in-house, you live with all the limitations of that person, of what they can or can't do. You have to then rely on them. You really don't, you can't even, it's hard then to have multiple people that could give you advice. So I'm not super keen on doing that. On the other hand, I know it's also very difficult to find lawyers that I think one can really trust, that aren't just trying to, rack up their hours. So we've been very fortunate that we've had a, good recommendation, and we have a fantastic attorney working for us. So I hope he can do all of the work for us for as long as possible, and not have to do that in-house. But, obviously you're talking about whether you have 100 people, or 100 people, I don't think you need inside counsel. 1,000 people, yeah, it's probably, a different question then. So same with marketing, if you can have an external marketing team that really does a great job, and that you can rely on, that's fine. But that's probably the function that we'll bring in-house relatively soon.
And so now a bit more into kind of the sales and marketing pieces. So when you were thinking about, hey, we're going to target large enterprise customer base, and when you were trying to figure out what is the right price point, how did you think about, and what strategy did you deploy to say, okay, it's $500,000 or 500 or 250 or What is that mental process and the decision making process you've been going through to define the pricing structure?
Right. So, our starting point is to say, what value do we provide? What's the ROI? How much of a pain point is it? And are they saving labor? Are they increasing their sales? Is it customer satisfaction? Mm-hmm. In quite a few cases, in fact, I would say almost every enterprise customer or prospect we talk to have either tried to implement chatbots or have implemented chatbots, mm-hmm. And are not happy with the results. So that puts us in a good position because they've already decided they need to have a chatbot. Mm-hmm. They need to have 24/7 customer support. They want to have the reduced cost of having automation. So they know they need it, and they've probably spent a lot of money trying to implement it, and they're not satisfied with the results. So then our task is just to explain to them why our chatbot with a brain. Other mm-hmm. chatbots don't have a brain. Ours has a brain. It can think and reason and learn and have deep understanding, can be hyper personalized to the individual. It's interacting with. So it's a completely different experience. And we are willing to, we are not willing, our task, our capability as a company is to make this work within their company, behind their firewall. Mm-hmm. So, it's not just that we're throwing a piece of technology over the fence. We actually provide as much of a turnkey solution as they want us to provide. So we basically will guarantee performance as well. So that's the story we have. So then we say, what is that worth to the client? And for us, the most important thing is we need to provide value to the customer. That needs to be clear, not just the contract we manage to negotiate with them. It needs to be, and usually it's a land and expand. Usually we get a relatively small project, which might be, a few % of the ultimate potential in the company of once they can do everything. So we have a land and expand, have to add a lot of value. And for us, it has to be sticky, so it has to be deeply integrated into the company to provide the best kind of service. Because if you're interacting with a client, clearly you need the chatbot to know about the client, know about the product availability, business rules, FAQs, all of that kind of thing. So to make it sticky, and for us, it's basically all about ARR, recurring revenue. That's the main thing. Now, in some cases, we can charge many hundreds of thousands of dollars for the implementation. In other cases, we do that for free. Okay. And so in my previous company, in Smart Action, in fact, I built a company on the basis that we did not charge for implementation. We were so confident that this would be, they couldn't live without it, basically, and that we would have the recurring revenue. There are pros and cons. I'm not saying it's necessarily the ideal model. And for some, and really the conclusion I've come to is for some customers, it works. For other customers, doing the implementation for free, if you can afford to do that, is actually a good thing. Where it works against you is you may not have their commitment to the project. They may see it as some kind of a pilot, a test pilot, but they're not really committed to it if they don't have skin in the game. So one needs to judge that, can you accelerate the sales process if you offer it for free? Are they still going to be committed to, doing what they need to do on their side to get it implemented? And, are they willing and able to pay for development? So those are kind of the trade-offs we look at. But really for us, the goal is provide such a compelling product and service that they can't live without us. And the value that we add to it basically will make it very lucrative for us as a company.
Mm-hmm. And when you I assume this is you and your CFO, when you guys were thinking about this, on the pricing structure, what I didn't hear you mention is the kind of the consideration of the cost side of delivering that service, right? And making sure that whatever you're delivering at the end, it has a margin on it, right? And ideally,
yes. Right. And that's the beauty of our business is that because we are not actually offering this as a SaaS service, we are implementing this behind the customer's firewall. So they're actually paying for the running cost in the cloud because they own the cloud service, which is a very unusual model, but one that customers really love because they are much more comfortable having our software run behind their firewall. And they control it. It still might run in Amazon Cloud or Google Cloud or something, but it's a cloud service that they own and they control, but they also pay for it. So the running costs we have are actually negligible. Mm-hmm. We obviously have support costs. With a big client, you have, pretty much a dedicated person looking after that client just to make sure that everything's running well. There's ongoing development, but that we can charge for. So typically, there we would cover costs to make some money on that. We don't see ourselves as a services company at all, so we don't really care, whether we make money or not on the services side of business. I mean, obviously, we don't want to lose money if we can avoid it, but it's such a small portion overall of our overall revenue. The bulk of the revenue, and really what's going to make or break our company is recurring revenue. And as I say, for recurring revenue, we have negligible cost.
Yeah. So what you're delivering is raw code, right? You're not delivering a kind of the traditional out of the box type software. You deliver raw code, embedding it inside of the behind the firewall, and they're basically paying you for licensing fees for it.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it as licensing. It's a licensing fee, but we take our engine and our technology and basically help them integrate it into their existing infrastructure because they already have a call center infrastructure. They have probably some chatbot infrastructure, which they may or may not use. In some cases, they may use existing chatbot, the actual client interface. But in most cases, we will supply that as well and help them integrate it into their, website or their app or whatever. So yeah, but it's primarily it's essentially a licensing model.
And how do you think about the competitive risks when you become that exposed to a customer, right? Where the customer is pretty much you're behind their scenes. They see the nuts and bolts of your product. How do you think about the protection and the kind of the risks associated with that, right? Because once your customer sees what it is that you're doing,
right,
enough customer, how do you make sure that they're just not just going to quickly,
right? So that theoretically that's a risk. Practically, it really isn't a risk. Because we have invested, literally 20 years of development in that. And what we have, the intelligence engine, the brain that our system has is, it's just a fantastic piece of engineering. They can't reverse engineer it. Even if we gave this to, and here I'm sticking out my neck, but even if we gave this to Amazon, they couldn't reverse engineer it.
Okay.
And there are reasons. There are reasons for that. Now, could they get some ideas? Obviously, once people say how successful we are with the approach that we've taken, I'm not saying there isn't anybody else in the world who could come up with something similar, but it would take a very, very substantial effort, way beyond what our customers would be willing to take on. Even if it's a $10 billion company or so. Usually they have a huge backlog on their IT and development themselves. And that's not the business they're in. So it's not something they could easily reverse engineer. So that's not a concern, not really a concern we have. And of course, because of our land and expand and the companies we're dealing with are all dynamic companies. They acquire new companies, they bring in new product lines, their business rules change, they have new communication channels that come about. So they also constantly will benefit from the enhancements that we make. I mean, that's one of the big things in the license fee. And when I say, in my first software company, we had a new product out every 18 months, a new major version or a rewrite in that case. I see us innovating like this on an ongoing basis. So as we increase the IQ of our chatbot, of our brain, we'll be able to handle more and more complex interactions, which means they can automate more, they can give better service to their customers, they can use it internally for their own staff. So what they're getting for the license fee is also that ongoing upgrade path. Now, with Aigo AI, we are committed to making this backward compatible. So to making the upgrade seamless, as seamless as possible. I mean, it won't always be totally seamless. In some cases, there may be some kind of a really step function, where we need to redo fairly major parts of the system. But it's a commitment we have. We want to bring every single one of our clients along with the development that we have. And that's part of the benefit that A, they'll be happy to pay the license fee, and B, there's no way they're going to even think about trying to develop it themselves, because they'll see the innovation that we'll have with 100-person team or 1,000-person team that they couldn't possibly match.
Great. No, that's an interesting perspective. And Aigo is probably in a considerably different position to be able to do that than most organizations, right? Most organizations don't have 20 years behind their.
Correct. Yeah, we are in a very unique situation there, and the beauty is that we've cracked the code on how to build an intelligence engine. And right now, we are nowhere near human level intelligence. Our system doesn't have nearly the broad general knowledge and common sense knowledge that humans have. We just know a lot of stuff by growing up in the world, and interacting with the world. And so, if we say currently, Alexa or Siri have an IQ of 10, we're at maybe 30.
Oh.
But, we can continue increasing that IQ, and that's where our customers will benefit. And that's part of, as I say, what they get for the license fee that they're paying, that if this year it's at 30, next year it'll be at 35, and the year after at 40, or whatever the number is. So their product will keep getting better and better and more useful.
That's very interesting. And I think you're absolutely right that's really at the end of the day, that evolution, product improvement is something that your customer or even competition is oftentimes going to have the hardest time trying to keep up with, especially if you have such a big advantage to begin with. Now, let's talk about the future, right? So when you think about Aigo, what vision do you, as the leader of the organization, have, and what impact do you see it having on kind of the business itself, on your people and on the market?
Yeah. So, now working with the second generation and everything we've learned from the first generation, both in terms of the product and in terms of the company structure, we are now super confident that we can really capture, be dominant in this space of conversational AI. So anything where you want automated conversation, which is huge. I mean, whether you're talking about being able to interact in natural language with your car, your infotainment system. And we've had, car companies come to us that are struggling with the limitations of being able to interact with the car, but that's just one small example. We're talking VR, we're talking, virtual reality. When you're immersed in virtual reality, you want to be able to interact with that virtual reality. Medical systems, having a helper that can help people with their diabetes management, for example, having an assistant, having a sales assistant, to help you manage Salesforce. I mean, salespeople hate using Salesforce. So if they could just talk to Aigo and say, tell me about my next appointment, and Aigo can come back and tell them, everything what the customer is looking for, what they discussed previously. Do they have any kids? Do they have any hobbies? Igo can answer those questions. You're done with the customer sale, and you can just say to Igo, remind me next Tuesday to follow up, send them brochure X, and let my boss know what's going on. And Igo can take care of that. So that personal assistant, I mean, the market is huge. And beyond that, our vision is that ultimately individuals should have their own personal assistant that not some mega corporation owns, but you own. We call that a personal assistant. And the reason we actually should call it personal assistant, because there are three different meanings of the word personal that are really important. The first meaning is personal in your ownership. It's yours. You own it. You control it. It serves your purpose, not somebody else's purpose. The second meaning of personal is it's personalized to you. It's customized to you. It knows your preferences, your history, and so on. The third meaning of personal is that it's private. It only shares information with who you want to share information with. So if I say, what is our ambition? That 8 billion people in the world should have their own personal Igo to help them manage their lives. But we'll be happy to start with 8 million, and then we'll work our way up from that. So, so as far as enterprise, we're starting with enterprise. Consumer products are obviously very hard to get into consumer markets. So we're starting with enterprise, starting with very large customers. As we establish ourselves, as the company grows, obviously it would make sense for us to then go to mid-tier and to also, offer this to smaller customers. But in parallel, we're also developing the market to give this to individuals. Now, there are many areas of obvious expansion. At the moment, we're only doing text. One of the next developments is to also offer voice interaction. We then have potentially adding products to help call center operators actually manage their conversations, where Igo can be an assistant to them to help them with their conversations, because we already have that integration. So there's a sort of a very clear path for us of where we're going. And it's really more looking at individual opportunities and customers that we have, of where we focus first.
And as you are going after that vision, do you have any thought processes around whether there are sequential steps, or whether it's that you need to achieve, let's say, first we need to do X, then we need to do Y, then we need to do Z, and so on? Where do you are letting it be more of a fluid process? How do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's both. I think it's important to have a plan, but it's also important that you're willing to tear up your plan and redo it. So yes, we do have a plan. And right now our focus is on, having a handful of large corporate clients that are fully implemented that we can use as reference clients, because that obviously makes it a lot easier. The first ones are the hardest, because they say, well, where else do you have it running? Well, nobody yet, or how many clients do you have? Well, including you, or, that kind of conversation. So we're getting there very rapidly, where we'll have a handful of clients that are actually fully implemented. We can use them as reference clients, as a showcase, and then things will become a lot easier. We've been holding off on, trying to raise sort of more substantial amounts of money. We have enough runway at the moment. We obviously want to be in a stronger position, because we are doing things very, very differently from our competitors. And that spooks VCs or investors generally, because they call in their experts and say, can you look at Igo and see what they're doing? And we say, well, we don't use deep learning. We don't use machine learning. We don't use big data. We use, for us, we focus on the quality of the data, not the quantity. And, the technicalities of how we do it, it's very, very different from our competitors. And that's why we can achieve much better results as well. But it's not, then, okay, why is nobody else doing that? Why isn't Google doing it? And we kind of have to explain it. But investors tend to follow. They tend to follow the trends rather than to bet on something that's a breakthrough technology. So we want to be in a position where we're strong enough that, yes, this breakthrough technology is actually working in the real world. You don't have to take our word for it, And so then of course, at the moment we don't have unlimited resources. So our growth and ambitions of how much we can tackle at the same time is somewhat limited by finances. But we don't see that being the case for very much longer. We hope to be and expect to be in a place where we have to beat investors away with a stick. As when once a company becomes trendy, or then everybody wants in. Yeah. And hopefully we'll be in that position pretty soon, that we will have zero financial constraints, where it'll be just how fast can we grow without screwing up.
Mm-hmm. And now this is actually an interesting transition, because that's where I wanted to go next. So when it comes to finances, how do you evaluate, let's say right now an investor comes to you and says, you know what, I do want to take the bet, right? I do want to be that person. How do you evaluate how much to take? How do you view that decision-making process, or how do you view it in the past?
Yeah, so it obviously depends on how important it is, for you to keep control of the company, and how strong a position you're in financially. And, that has varied from my one company to another company to another company. My ERP company was literally totally bootstrapped. It was, I started with $1,000 or $5,000 or something, and it bootstrapped. It completely bootstrapped. We never got any external money until we listed the company, and we didn't need the money then. I tried to do the same thing with Smart Action, and it didn't work out as well there. We needed to get outside money, and we then got into a situation where investors had too much control and weren't necessarily on board with the sort of long-term goals, and once investors have too much of a stake, it's very hard to find an investor who isn't looking for an exit. Mm-hmm. And you run a company very, very differently, whether you're working towards an exit or whether you're working towards achieving some world-changing technology. You're trying to build a quality company, and that really has legs. It's very different. It's just a completely different dynamic. So with Igo AI, we're not looking for an exit at all. That's not what we're about. We'll list the company, or there are many vehicles available now of how our current investors can, eventually cash in their chips, or liquidate some of their holdings. I think there are many opportunities. I'd love to do an IPO again. Great experience with that. But there are other possibilities. So I've put in more than $10 million into the company myself, so we're able to really develop the technology, get going. We've had about another $5 million of external money come in. We've been running extremely lean. Everyone in the company is a shareholder, or every single person has options in the company. That's the kind of company we are. Everyone's motivated. We're going to be a unicorn soon. When I say soon, maybe not next month, but one of these years soon. So it's what valuation do you put on? So at the moment, we have to weigh off, obviously, how much are we giving up? Are we going to keep control of the company? Because if we lose control of the company, and there are obviously mechanisms, you can have 10x voting rights or whatever, but you still have to be strong enough that your investors accept that, that our current management team is going to stay in charge. Mm-hmm. We're going to execute our vision, not whatever the investors think is best for whatever pressure points they have at any given time. So that's really important for us. And as I say, we have enough runway now that we can execute our plan well. We can hire people, and we want to be in a strong position next time we raise money, and make sure we keep solid control of our destiny.
And how do you, right? So every entrepreneur would love to be obviously in a position where money is not is an option, right? Taking money
Right.
is not necessary. But yeah, from my experience, most often what happens, especially with some of the clients that I work with or still work with, $10 million, $15 million goes very fast, right?
Mhm.
Especially when you're investing significant amounts into your people, into the product, and so on. Now, what infrastructure do you and your CFO put in place to actually ensure that along the way, right, in between the rounds or in between the funding events, that there is fiscal responsibility in place and that you can actually, make sure that the bills are paid. How do you view that kind of real life challenge, so to speak?
Yeah, well, in our company, it's actually fortunately it's actually very simple because we really have the three founders, CFO, um, my partner on the marketing side, Srini Pagityala, and myself, and the three of us, we all have the same mind. I mean, we all have the sort of inherently the same fiscal responsibility, and the additional management that have come on board more recently are also just they're the same kind of people. They have the same kind of mindset. So once management has that mindset, it really filters through the company.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you have to buy $1,000 chairs?
Yeah,
Or not?
yeah,
Is that like the standard thing that you do? Do you have to have banners at the airport? Or whatever, blaring out your name. We just on the same page, and we work on fumes basically, and that's just kind of, and especially the people that are likely to be expensive. We're in it. I mean, I don't draw a salary, so I mean, it's our shareholding that we're working for in the vision, and okay, how much money do you actually need, So that's it. It's kind of easy where we are now. Obviously, as you grow, you will bring more people on board who may be more sort of, hey, if I was working in Silicon Valley, I'd be earning 3 times as what you're offering me, So what gives? They really have to believe in the vision and in the potential and just how awesome our product is, how awesome our potential is, and that we really can change the world. And almost everyone we hire right now is that excited about it. That this is really something different. This is not another Uber for dog food or, whatever, some advertising optimization or something. This is something really different that can change the world, and that's exciting. And that definitely helps us.
Definitely. Well, Peter, I want to thank you very much. This has been an amazing conversation. Again, I have Peter Voss here, and I want to thank you. I wish you all the best and good luck with IGO, and I hope the vision gets achieved. And I'm going to have my personal assistant very soon here, so I'm pretty excited about that.
We're working on it. Yeah, and anybody wants more information, I've actually written quite a lot about our technology, our approach, our philosophy. It's on medium.com under my name, Peter Voss. Also our website, igo.ai, we have links to articles, demos, and things. And if you want to get in contact with me, it's easy to find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, or just peter@igo.ai.
Fantastic. Well, thanks a lot, Peter. Appreciate it, and we'll wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, well, thank you.